I'm broke. I'm tired. I can't take it anymore.
Life of an architect. I mean, you could have said you're broken.
Well, broken,
I'm
broke.
broken
I'm broke
and broke.
in.
Uh-huh. You broke in.
Yeah. Uh,
You're an old horse. Yes, I get it. You're like a fine leather jacket, Cormac. That's what you are.
I was talking to a friend of mine today, and he was asking me, what do I feel was my most successful project?
Mm.
And we started talking. It was like all across the board. It ended up being like 2.5 hour phone call. And it was kind of like all across the board. We hit like every conversation about architecture that you can imagine.
Please lay down on the couch and
But one of the things that was interesting is, and even though I'm extraordinarily happy with the way that this particular project came out architecturally, the reason why I think this particular project that I had selected as part of this was the whole process behind the project. And he was just like, see, that's what I'm looking for. He goes, I'm looking for jazz. And I'm like, explain. And he's just like,
yeah, seriously.
he goes, I'm looking for an ensemble of different characters, different ideas, different things, people, whatever, that come together with their own bit of knowledge, experience, expertise, passions, the soul that they bring to what they can offer. And when it comes together, you may think that this is like a weird ragtag bunch of people to put together, but when it comes together, it just makes jazz. And I was like, all right, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
okay.
get it.
All right.
And so we used that as kind of like the disclaimer for what we thought was, whether it was the most collaborative, the most immersive, whatever it was that made that project like your favorite project, your most memorable project, the best project, and whatnot. And
The
it's
one
not
you
to,
wanted to show up to work for. How about that?
and the one that you wanted to show up to work for. But
Because there's definitely projects that are slowly killing you, and you're like looking for excuses of why you don't want to show up because it's gotten to that point. And maybe
yeah,
a lot of projects get to that point, but man, there are some that just never get to that point. And
right.
you just want to go to work every day, and you are excited about working on it. And you might be doing something really mundane, but you have a view of the bigger picture, which is you're filling in all those details that are going to
Yeah,
make it sing, that are going to make it jazz, as you say.
exactly.
This
Exactly.
is how you speak. Yeah.
And I looked at it and I was like, there's a handful of projects that I got immersed into the daily life of whoever that user would be.
Look at
And
you and the empathy. That's you.
but I mean, it's just like, especially us, the projects that we've worked on public schools, we've worked on like rec centers, we've worked on all of these different like civic projects, right?
Yeah.
So there is a user virtually from every walk of life that's going to be using these buildings. There are the users who are going to be there like every single day, teachers in the classroom, custodial staff, food staff, all of these different things. And so I was talking about like kind of like my love affair for academic work and things like a lot of the K through 12 stuff, and talked about how immersive you can get in there. Sometimes I've felt with like resistance in a bunch of these different projects where they're like, remember, this isn't a very wealthy like school district, so they don't need high design. And you're like, wait, what? I mean, isn't that just the
They just
like,
mean expensive when they say that. Yeah.
exactly?
Yeah.
But so for me, and I don't know if we want to get into like specifics, but to me, in like right there is a picture of the building, and right there and there are the awards that I won for it. You know, not
I'm shaking my head because your finger bends in very weird ways. I always have. You have very creepy fingers.
And for those of you who are not watching this on video, you're missing this.
Oh, God, there's the thumbnail right there with your.
But so he was just like, well, what made it that project special?
And can I ask why he's asking this? Is it because he wants to talk about a special project that he's worked on, or is it because he hasn't experienced it, or
he doesn't feel like he really didn't feel like he's experienced it.
Okay,
and he was like the one.
I was guessing that, but I thought the other angle might be fun to throw out there.
It would have been. And it was interesting because I sat there for a few minutes and I'm like, have I had my jazz project?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about all the different projects that I've had throughout my 20 plus years career so far and growing. And I've had a lot of different projects and a lot of different scales, big monster projects, $500 million budget down to, a 20 by 20 maintenance shed.
Right.
And I always go back to the first one. That's the first one. That was my very first project management job.
Oh, man.
It was a 20 by 20 maintenance shed for the city of St. Petersburg in a dog park.
First real project. Yeah.
And, and so the project that I was referring to was the EO Wilson Biophilia Center. It's in Freeport, Florida. And the thing that I enjoyed so much about it, it was a part of my life for well over 2 years. And when I say it was a part of my life, it wasn't just, oh my gosh, I've been doing this project for 2 years. No, I was immersed in it. I was a part of these people's lives. And I was trying to learn what it was that they do, because it was a gamut of things. I mean, it's the Ngozi Plantation, and it is a foundation that is essentially restoring North Florida's ecosystem back to kind of a pre-colonial stage. And so there's the founder behind all of this. He bought up all of this land, and he was taking all of this land, and he was taking, he basically bought all of this, what was old longleaf pine forest that then was basically mowed down, and then it was turned into basically quick grow southern yellow pine, or a type of white pine that grew quickly so that they could harvest it for paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so rows and rows and rows of paper mill grade pine trees. And so he initially bought 53,000 acres. Yeah. But he strategically bought that 53,000 acres that abutted state forest lands, protected wildlife lands, as well as lands that were owned by the federal government for Eglin Air Force Base. But it was all of this continuous, there was almost 1 million square acres of continuous forest land. Sure, there's a few interruptions of roads and things like that, but he was basically
but it's protected. It's
it was
it's not
all
protected.
Yeah.
None of that stuff will get developed around it. So it's
right.
It's got this buffer, this amazing buffer.
And so one of the key factors that he wanted to do was, one thing is he made a refuge for the gopher tortoise and hired some of the foremost experts on gopher tortoise rescue, because in the state of Florida, gopher tortoises were protected. And if you were working on a project and there were gopher tortoises on there, you either had to do one of two things: not build, or you had to have them relocated to another location.
Wow.
And there were heard way too many stories about one day gopher tortoises were there and another day they disappeared. Sure, they disappeared. Where did they go? Right. They're tortoise. They don't move that fast. And builders and developers were basically eradicating, and to a point of near extinction of the native Florida gopher tortoise. And so this was one of the many places, also the black bear, also the Florida panther, and a bunch of other things. So that was kind of one mission. Another mission was to restore it to its pre-colonial days. And so what he was doing was, cutting down all of the fast growth trees and replanting in a very strategic way all these longleaf pines, and then intermixing them with the short grow. And I'm blanking on what they were actually called, but they were trees the trees that were there when he bought the land were maybe between 5 and 7 years old. That's how quickly they were it's a rotating crop of basically saplings and maybe like small barrel trees that then were replaced. But the interesting thing about it is that, he did like control burns and cut these trees down with some pretty amazing equipment that, I'm sure you've seen them. They're like almost like a backhoe type, thing that basically goes and grabs the tree and cuts the tree off at that. And then it basically is carrying the tree off, and then it stacks it and stuff. One of the things about why I feel like that project was successful is a lot of the planning for the project was me immersing myself in what they do. I was there helping them with control burns. I was there helping cut down trees.
Wow.
I was there helping them protect pitcher plants, which are the plants that look like a pitcher, like not a picture plant, like as in taking pictures, but a big picture plant that looks like it's a picture of water.
I'm gonna have to look this up.
You're gonna have to look this up.
Yeah,
look up the picture.
Your hand waving in the air is not helpful.
Yeah. And then, and so, as he's developing kind of this conservancy, this restoration of the ecosystem, one of the things that his mission was to basically create a space for environmental education. And it was kind of a one of a kind educational opportunity for this area, because what it was for a week, elementary. So basically 3 different times throughout your lifetime in the public school system, there's a couple of different Okaloosa County, Walton County, all these like counties around this area near Freeport, Florida, they would go, and as an elementary school, middle school, and high schooler would go there for a week-long immersion program of essentially being an ecologist for a week and learning how to be good stewards of the land. And it was such an amazing program and such an amazing mission. And you couldn't help but want to immerse yourself into this, everything about what this was. And so it was interesting because when they first asked us, because here's how we stumbled on it. It was me and my old college roommate. And because we knew people who worked with this guy, they were like, hey, would you help us write a request for proposal or request for qualifications from all of these architects? We want to write this. We want to get an architect to help us with all of the construction projects that we want to do on this thing. And we're like, sure. Yeah, we'll help out. And so we did. And
you didn't say like, wait, look, I'm an architect.
Well, first of all, at the time we weren't. We were unlicensed. We were doing like some residential at the time, and that was it. And so that's what we could do. And there were things that we were doing to kind of like get by and stuff. And so when we helped them write it, we were like, thank you very much. They paid us for our time and all of that other stuff. And then they started getting in there all of these proposals. And then we get a phone call and they're like, hey, Cormac, we haven't seen your proposal yet. And you're like, well, what do you mean? It's just like, well, we were assuming that you were,
Cormac.
What do you mean? You're like, so we were hoping that because this project and you know what we're trying to accomplish, that
They're like,
you would submit.
do I need to spell it out for you?
Well, we didn't because we
Clearly the
weren't
answer is
licensed, and this was a commercial project. And so,
Okay.
I reached out to a friend who said that I asked, and I was like, "Hey, would you be willing to partner with us to go after this project?" And
They're
she was
literally like holding all the proposals just so you can get yours in at this point.
and they
received
did
them all.
And funny enough, they did. And it was interesting who we were up against.
Why did
too.
they go through all that if they just wanted to work with you? That's hilarious.
Well, it wasn't even that. And so here's one thing that I sort of wish that I could have had on tape, because I do not remember 1 millisecond of my, as they said, impassioned speech about what our vision for their project was and how we would be able to help them achieve their vision, their goals for this project.
That's when they knew.
And I apparently for like quite, I don't know, what probably to me felt like 2 hours, but was probably around the neighborhood of like 5 to 10 minutes, was this very impassioned speech about the project and, what our qualifications were to be able to accomplish it, and the team that we had assembled and all of these other things. And they literally said that the reason why was not because we were up against some amazing architects, some architects that I love their work. And
you were like, you should definitely pick them.
Fanboying. I don't know if I'm allowed. Should I say who we were up against?
I don't see why not.
No, it's so we competed. So we shortlisted 3 people: us, Methuen, and Lake Flato.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like,
both.
I
great
over
firms.
Lake Flato's work.
Sure.
And we beat Lake Flato. We beat Methuen. Methuen is
had a relationship.
Methuen is the master at this kind of work. Like, why would you not pick them? But they picked us. And for the next...
Your fees were really low.
Probably that too. But for the next... But I mean, we lived there for one. And so we were easily accessible. We didn't have to like fly in from Seattle or from Texas. We literally just drove down the road and we were there. Right. And when we say we lived there though, but we lived there. We lived with them. We ate with them. We told stories with them. We became part of them. And it was such, it would,
I'm going to do the thing. Look at, that was
it was so symbiotic. It was. And so it was jazz because we all brought all of our different experiences. It was so funny is because of the initial sketches that I had done for the building, just based off of the program exercises, I don't have them anymore. In fact, I don't have anything from that project anymore. It was back in the day when you did a lot of things by hand. And then in the model that I built, oh my God, the model that I built was it was amazing. I mean, if I do say so myself.
What's funny is your memories of these things are probably better than the actual things.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying.
No. So the model was, I loved that model. And I spent a lot of time building that model. That was, so I'm
wondering about your fees here. Yeah, I'm still. This is just cranking in the back of my mind. I'm just like, oh my God.
Let's just say there was a reason. There was a reason why we went out of business.
Yeah,
was that? But because I spent so much time on that model. I mean, I literally blood, sweat, and tears for that one. But it was like it was probably the last real model that I ever built. And it was probably the best model that I had ever built, ever. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the research that I did to make the water look like water and all of the other things to just like, because we built a 3-acre pond, which was a retention pond, but it made it look like the building was kind of floating over the water. And we'll definitely put a link in the show notes to this so that everybody can kind of take a look at it. And you can be as harsh as you want on the architecture, because to be quite honest with you, I was a
don't mess with
kid.
Cormac's jazz
No,
project.
I even told my friend, I was just like, I don't think it was the best architecture I ever did. I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know a lot. And
Of course.
but I also
every building
learned,
that we do is not going to be the best because there's the next building usually.
Yeah,
that's right.
absolutely.
It's going to be better.
But it was the whole cohesive experience of this, like, pure, totally understanding exactly what the program was. Like, because I was living the program, I was just like, I know, it's like, I may not know what they need, but I know I can give them what they need. And because it's just like, oh, well, you need, like, this is the kind of space that you need. And it was such a cool place. And so the great thing about it is that now it's, it opened in 2008, I believe. And now we're in the second decade of this building, educating students and growing and expanding. And now they have a Raptor Center, and the ongoing unfortunately, the developer who started this had passed, but he knew that this project was going to outlive him. I had the opportunity to meet EO Wilson and present him with a watercolor that we did for the project. And it was amazing to, like, just sit down and meet this guy that the world reveres as this foremost biologist that is just this awesomely cool, down-home Alabama boy who just was like the nicest dude you could ever imagine. It's like doctorates from Harvard are tripping over themselves to talk to this guy, and he's just a country boy at heart. And it was so, like, the whole thing was just one of these projects that, if I don't do another project like that, and again, like I said, it's not really about the architecture. I mean, I'm proud of it. Is there, now that I'm another 2 decades later from that project, that I absolutely know that I can do better architecture.
Sure.
But I don't know if I'm going to ever have a better experience in architecture, because it was
formative too. I mean, it was just one of those things that made you the architect that you are.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Going through that process. And it's interesting, right? Because when we get into the corporate architecture world, and there are project managers and there are the contracts, and the game is completely different, right? It's like, you get penalized for spending more time on a project. You can't live the project like you did, right? It's like, less is better. It's like, it's not better for the building. Well, less is better. Believe me, it's better for our bottom line. Right. And you get into these traps, and I mean, and maybe the way you did it is actually a trap. I mean, I'm sure there's some balance to be achieved here, right? Because
it ruined me for a while.
Like you said, you can't continue. It's not a sustainable business to do it the way that you did it, potentially, right? So there's a balance to be achieved here, but it was so, like, you wouldn't trade that experience for anything, right?
Never.
I mean, and that is what you're actually remembering is how it's not, I'm sure it wasn't all amazing, but when you look back on it, it was so formative for you to become an architect that it's really special. This episode is made possible with support from Chaos Enscape. This is the perfect time to set good intentions and resolutions for the months ahead. Whether you aim to solve your design challenges faster, run your projects more smoothly, make quicker decisions, or share immersive walkthroughs with the click of a button, here's some good news. You won't need any resolutions. Chaos Enscape has the best 3D workflow solution. Chaos Enscape is the industry-leading real-time visualization plugin that is 100% fast, 100% easy, and fully integrated into your favorite design tools. It is the trusted choice of over 500,000 monthly users across 150 countries. Starting today, you can get a 20% discount on fixed and floating annual licenses. Just head to chaos-enscape.com and use code RES24 at checkout. That's chaos-enscape.com using code RES24 at checkout to supercharge your design workflow. Thanks to Chaos Enscape so much for their support of this episode. And now let's get back to the conversation.
It's interesting because we've said this a couple of times in some of the recent episodes about the experiencing of the place so that you kind of really understand what it was. And when we were supposed to write an article about the experience of a building, and I packed up and used the weekend to drive up there and actually experience the place so that I could really give an informed decision. And it's so interesting that, when you talk about like corporate architecture, as part of this conversation that we were having about jazz architecture was are we form builders or placemakers? When we're placemakers, we're really, it's like that building could be only one place. It's that place at that time, and that's the right response for it. That's placemaking. If it's an object that could be picked up and moved to another place or another place or another place, and it just looks like whatever, then that's form building. And a lot of times the corporate architecture really is just about form making. It's about, like, how do you, our conversation even kind of devolved into like, and why most projects aren't jazz, why they are, just there's
so much working against that. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And so when I said that I was ruined after that project, I really did find it because this was when I stopped. The project was in construction administration. Then 2008 happened, and everybody, who knows what happened in 2008 knows that, most architects were going out of business or losing their jobs or basically trying to shore up the job that they had so that they don't lose it. And so it was a really tough time. And so because we went out of business, and so 2008 was one of the reasons why we went out of it, not just necessarily our choices of how we spent money or little fees that we actually spent. And I could definitely go through like some other conversations about like what happened on this project of just like, anyway, I'll keep that sob story for myself or for a later conversation. But I was ruined because I expected too much out of every project since then. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, I expect too much out of projects because I want them to be that fulfilling. I want it to like be the jazz that it was. And there's jazz moments on projects where, the team comes together and they really are clicking and the design is really evolving and everybody's involved. And, there's this symbiotic relationship, the relationship that you were talking about of being able to like achieve so many things, both in design, in camaraderie, in all of these other things that, are rare in projects in a way sometimes. And so you have those moments, but like I said, I've had that one moment and I'm okay that if it's just a moment, that one moment, but I'm always expecting every project after to deliver that moment. And
it's interesting because you still have that desire and that fire to think it's possible.
Yeah.
Right? And what's crazy to me is that it hasn't happened in so long because you're talking about a project from 2008 that really made its mark. It's an indelible mark at this point.
Yeah.
That you haven't been completely beaten down with all of the other crap that you've experienced from now to then, because again, you're going back and you're saying that was the project. You're not saying any project since then has taken the spot of that project. And so you've had a lot of experiences between 2008 and now, and you're still hungry to see, and you still see the potential for that to happen.
Well, what's
and
the
it kind of
point
hasn't
of doing?
happened, but
Yeah.
you're still there. Like, I think that's pretty incredible, because I think a lot of people don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying this. I mean, I think it's actually really incredible that you still do have that.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who are just like, they've been beaten down and beaten down. And we know what this profession does to people.
Yep,
It eats people up and it spits them out.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong way. It chews people up and it spits people out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of older generations of people and just toxic people who eat their young in this profession, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that literally happens to a lot of people, and here you are with still this optimism. I think it's pretty incredible.
I feel like I could be easily jaded, but then I think about
cynical, jaded, yeah, for sure.
But I still feel like what's the point in doing it if you can't, if like you don't expect the joy? What the hell's the point, right?
But there is this kind of so I said all that stuff that I just said, and yet, like, architects continue to be the optimists at the table, right? And we I'm patting us on the back right now. We are the champions of the vision and the what if and the what could be and the potential. And I find that incredibly interesting, even though we've had the experience, like I know the experience that the experiences that you've had since then. Like there's a lot of really, really, really bad stuff, right? And here you are, you're still the champion of what could be.
Let's see. So 2024, we've been doing this show for 12 years. We've both been on each other's journey of experiences of projects and clients and leaving firms and firm cultures and all of these other things. And we know what the profession's like. But we're still doing this because we still do have that passion to
right.
And I was, when we were talking today, and again, like I said, it was like a 2.5 hour long conversation. I mean, I felt so giddy and so charged after having this conversation with a like-minded person who really, like, he was like, but doesn't architecture rob you of some of the things that you can do? It takes you from your family and all of these other things. I'm like, it can if we let it. And we do often let it. I was like, but also if you think about it, like going on a vacation with your family doesn't have to be divorced. And I was doing this silly thing. Doesn't have to be divorced from architecture and stuff. I was using these examples. I was like, we used to go on these drives where we would go on these like little history tours and follow the footsteps of George Washington or John Madison or Thomas Jefferson and visit their homes and
East Coaster.
Absolute East Coaster. It's like, or follow in the, like they actually have a John Wilkes Booth trail, and you can go to like all of like these pivotal events in American history that revolve around basically the plot, assassination of Lincoln and the capture of John Wilkes Booth. But almost every single bit of that, there's all of that history, but every single bit of that has architecture. There's architecture involved with every single step of that way. It's, let's go to Ford's Theater. Let's go across the street to the tavern where they tried to save Lincoln. Let's go and see the barn which is not there, but the barn that they captured John Wilkes Booth. Let's go see Dr. Mudd's house where he tried to patch up John Wilkes Booth, or where the tavern that they did the plotting and all of that other stuff. And as much as everybody's like immersed in the history of this, all of these events, and I am too, I'm also immersed into, here's the architecture. Like here is the placemaking that set the stage for all of these memories. This combined
story to unfold.
Exactly. Yeah. This story that people tell. that thousands and thousands of people have been telling their students and everything else throughout the past couple 100 years or 100.5 years. And all of that is immersed in architecture. And so I was just like, as much as we let architecture, we say that architecture, like, it kind of robs us of our life and stuff. I'm like, it also enriches our lives. It also is like a part of the things that we do. And so like, I was talking about it. I was like, every time we go on a trip, it's either covert or overt architecture tour. It all really depends. Like when I say, hey, we're going to go
not so sneaky anymore.
Well, sometimes it's like, hey, we're going to go to the Frank Lloyd Wright Trail. Well, they know that if we're going to do the Frank Lloyd Wright Trail, it's all about architecture. Or then it's like, hey, we're going to follow the footsteps of John Wilkes Booth. They may think, ooh, history. I'm thinking, ooh, history wrapped in architecture, or architecture wrapped in history. Right. So there's the covert of my overt actions. I know what I'm doing.
How many people in architecture get to experience a jazz project out of all the people and all the projects that actually happen? How many do you think feel that?
That's a hard question, because we were sitting here and we were talking about when we were having this conversation about the jazz architect, we were talking about all of these different places that had to have a greater connection with the client, with the land, with everything else. And he had brought up, and I know that this is near and dear to your heart too, he brought up the Salk Institute. And he talked about the experience. He was like the spiritual experience that he had at the Salk Institute. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you don't achieve that without jazz, right? And there are those projects around there that have that kind of like really great feeling. But then there's the background buildings. And I wonder if like, do the background buildings, do the infill projects, do people find joy in doing those projects where it is as satisfying as like designing the Salk?
I don't think so, man. I'm just going to put it out there. There may be some level of satisfaction in certain parts of doing that project, but I don't think it's the whole thing. I don't think it's as big of a deal as you're making it.
So then let me ask you this.
Found.
Do you think that architecture or those types of projects and stuff would be better if we did treat them as a jazz project? As that it's just like, we know that, you'd said it, it's like, projects are based off of metrics. They're based off of profitability. They're based off of like, how quickly we can get the turnaround in them. I was likening architecture projects to tables at a restaurant. It's not for you to just like sit around all day long and be that one person sitting there. They want
monopolize the table.
Yeah, it's like, chop, 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 get out. It's like, we need this to keep turning this profit. We need to keep rolling it. It's just like, we're not going to earn money off of serving one dude who's just going to be sipping coffee all day long.
And free refills, right?
And then that's what, so that's what kind of almost dilutes, when we struggle with trying to tell people, the value of an architect, when when we somewhat devalue our own contributions to the built environment by doing the, chop, chop, get out kind of projects.
I think this is the whole, like, bring your whole self to work. I mean, it's a lame way to say it.
Yeah.
But not enough people do bring their whole self to work. They don't bring their passion to work with them, because there's a lot of things outside of work that are affecting that as well. It's not just work.
Yeah.
But I think on any budget, on any project, you can make it a great project. Mm-hmm. I really think you can. And it's on some level, you have to protect yourself from the things that can bring you down. And you have to separate yourself or compartmentalize in some ways. I think, you could have a toxic client. You could have a bad schedule, you could have a terrible budget, you could have like a list of materials that you're like, how am I going to make something good out of CMU? Or and I don't want to be bad down on CMU. You actually absolutely can do amazing architecture with all kinds of seemingly simple building materials, right?
Right.
Look at what you can accomplish with the brick. Right?
Exactly.
But the thing is like, there's so many things affecting us and everybody on our team that if there are slight misalignments there, it's easy to lose that. And so to answer your question, could you do it? Absolutely. The potential, I think, is there on every single project, like your first maintenance building to your jazz project to the project you're working on today. There's absolutely the opportunity and the potential to do that. But can we bring ourselves to show up to do that? And I think that goes through cycles, and there's so many variables. And I think that's where it's hard, is like actually putting all those pieces together in the symphony that it needs to be, even if it's a low budget, fast turnaround project.
Right.
I mean, because there are the realities of the real world. And I mean, somebody could have their best friend die in a car crash, or their parents, or a kid problem, or a pet, or like, and all of these things work their way in and affect our day-to-day performance. Right. So, yeah. Have you ever had a project that was a really, really difficult process, and that you could interpret that however you want, turn out amazing, even though it was a really, really difficult process? Because you talked about your biophilia center, right? And it was the process,
right,
and the outcome, I think, probably both together, and the client and the location and everything working together. Have you ever had a project where it was like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to go to work, and then at the end, it still turned out of something you were incredibly proud of?
And there was, so I'll go and take it just one step further. It's like, there was a project, and has been several projects actually, that difficult client, difficult schedule, like difficult circumstances, pushing my own knowledge of design interpretation, pushing my knowledge of tectonics, of like trying new things with, the way that I was detailing things and all of these things. And it was a bear of a project. And, there was a point in time where I can't do this anymore. And I thought it was going to break me, and it didn't break me. And but it did beat me down. And I was just like, I don't ever want to see this project again, and so I will say that this is kind of cool. And I get it a little choked up, whatever. But in the, 2019 AIA convention, when we went out to Vegas, and I took my son with me because my oldest son, and he just graduated high school, and we did our cross-country tour back. And we were going to skip St. Louis. We were going to just drive right on past it. But I was like, no, let's go. And we went, and we went up into the Arch and all of those other things. And I was like, let's do some touristy things in St. Louis. But I wasn't going to go see my project, because I was just like, had this like love-hate relationship with it. I'm not saying what it is.
I did.
You did. And it was like, I had this love-hate relationship with it, because there was some like bad, it was rough.
It was hard. Yeah.
And I went back, and the way he was, and I was just like, you know what? I flew back and forth to St. Louis like several times a month, left the family for a couple of days a month, and went all of this stuff. And here's my son. He's now old enough, let me show him. Like, there was a lot of times where I would like just take them to my projects because they were local. And so it was good to kind of like take them to these projects, but I hadn't seen any of these projects because they're 1,000+ miles away. And so I was like, let's go do this. And so it was the building, and it was a pedestrian bridge. And so I parked on the side where we could walk over the pedestrian bridge and engage the building the way that it was supposed to be. And so now a couple years later, a couple years post construction, no, it was just like, there was like trepidation at best, to see this thing. It was just, and finally we visited it, and I was just like, holy shit, this turned out great. I was just like, this is good.
You just erased all those old memories.
I was just like, wow, like, all right now, and so, do you know what a bike trough is? Like,
yeah, on the side of the stairs.
On the side of the stairs. Right. So they had these bike troughs on the sides of all of their stairs and stuff. And I sat around, and then they asked us, hey, we want to add some bike troughs to these. And I'd never done a bike trough before. I never had a project like that had that much of a elevation change
this whole
between
project. I know this project. It's a big project.
Yeah.
You're talking about the bike troughs.
And we're talking about the bike trough because I sat and I looked at the operation of their bike troughs throughout this project. And I was just like, they're walking with their bike and they're leaning their bike way over because because of the proximity of the trough itself to the handrail, their pedals and their cranks would hit the
handlebar,
everything would hit it. And I'm like,
get in the way.
There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I redesigned the bike trough in a way that you didn't have to lean the bike over. You didn't have to lean over to like not knock the bike apart. And I sat there in this courtyard, in this little plaza, that had multiple different elevation changes and all this other stuff, and watched people first actually use the bike troughs. And then look to see how successful the bike troughs were. I was just like, yeah, like even the little things.
Sweet bike trough.
Yeah, it was just like, even the little things excited me. I was just
That's
like,
cool.
this. And then I looked at it and I was just like, this is actually holding up pretty well. I mean, it was like only 4 years later, but it was still 4 years later of abuse. And we know how academic spaces can be. I mean, they get abused left and right. And this was actually holding up pretty well. I mean, there was decisions that were made that like, it was hard to convince clients to do those decisions, but when they made those decisions, it worked out for the better. Like, people hate corner guards. Everybody hates corner guards, right? But like, I kept looking at like the way that their corner guards were used in like all of their other buildings, and they stopped the corner guards short, and then just below the corner guards, the walls were beat to crap.
Yeah.
And it was because the buffers were beating up the corners and all this other stuff. I'm like, you're going to go for the gusto of this. Just do full height, corner guards. And I'm like walking around our building 4 years later. And so there's 4 years of maintenance on this thing. And the corners still look good. The walls still look good.
Bike troughs and corner guards.
Bike troughs and corner guards. I mean, I actually really like the building itself. But
they really tie the room together, Cormac.
Exactly. It's like, but those corner guards and those bike troughs, like chef's kiss, man. I mean, those were
chef's kiss.
Those were the best thing about it.
I had a community center project it was a big team, right? So I'm definitely not taking credit for the whole thing, but we had a difficult principal in the firm.
Mm-hmm.
We had a difficult budget. We had a political client. It was like a district supervisor for LA County, and LA County's divided into all these districts. And so it was and it was an unincorporated area that was getting this new community center. And so there was all of this community involvement where they have never gotten any resources before because they're unincorporated. They don't have a mayor. They don't have a city council. They don't get a budget allocated. So they're going to the district supervisor. They're raising their taxes basically to pay for this project for their community. And so there's all these politics involved because you're dealing with those kind of people. Mm-hmm. And it's a big piece of land and a small budget, and there's 9 different agencies that we have to get approvals from because there's a food
The
component and
agencies.
it's unincorporated and it's you got to get this permit from here and you got to get this one from there, and the team it took forever and it shuffled around and there were 27 different schemes and we were there. Good Lord. It's a beautiful project. I cannot believe it actually happened, right? And it's one of those things where I look back on that project and I think it was worth it.
Yeah.
Like it actually was worth it. I don't know how we made out on that project. I don't know if we made any money. I know it was hard the whole time.
Yeah.
It was extremely difficult. There was a public art component that we had to work with an artist. And I mean, that's cool, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, except when it isn't.
Exactly.
Except when it isn't cool.
Exactly. And I totally
and there's all these competing ideas and execution is difficult and there's all of these things and it's on a prominent corner and how do you address the corner but the entry is on the other side. It was like just there's so many difficulties and constraints and things you're dealing with all the way through, and at the end, like, it's an amazing project. It looks and functions amazingly, and I cannot believe that we pulled it off. And so when I'm asking you this question, like, is there the project where it turns out like jazz, but it was a freaking disaster the whole time. It just felt like you're listening to a 7th grade band play, right?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like when you're doing it. And then at the end, it's like this amazing piece of music. It's this amazing piece of architecture. And I've experienced that too. And I'm just like, how did that even happen? I don't even, it's through sheer will and determination that it actually happens. And it's like, because we care so much that we're not going to let it be just some stucco box on a corner, you know?
Yeah. You know, what was interesting is I was, as part of the conversation that we were having today, you know, I had said that the projects that I appreciated the most were the ones with the least amount of budget, because
you did the most with the least.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
You learn to stretch your design dollar to, like, you know, you didn't even know you could stretch a dollar that far. And it taught you how to do things in tricks or things like that stretch that dollar. And it was just so amazing to be able to do projects like that, because you're able to get creative with, like, it's like, all right, here's literally the kit of parts. This is like, you can go to Home Depot and buy every single bit of pieces that is going to go into this building off the shelf. But how you put it together, how you assemble it, how that symphony, when half of your baritones are hitting puberty.
Well, what's crazy is like all these bands use the same instruments.
Yeah.
But what they do with them is all over the map when it comes to how it actually turns out sounding. Right?
Yeah, don't even get me started.
We've beaten the sound analogy to death, but it happens, and I think it is interesting that we maintain the optimism over our careers to do the most with the least, or striving to find the next piece of music. You know, that really makes a mark, that really just leaves that indelible mark on you that you'll never forget. I mean, it doesn't happen often, right? But when it does, it's truly special.
Oh yeah, absolutely.